We open on a boy screaming for help at the bottom of a well, jump to a woman yelling directly at the camera. It quickly brings us back to a closed room where Marc is with Dr. Harrow, who is analysing him once again. The doctor talks to Marc about his responsibility for his situation. Marc again expresses his doubt that his situation is real, and we return to the scene with the hippo. Marc and Steven are told by the hippo that they are dead. She unrolls a scroll and welcomes them to Duat, the Egyptian afterlife. Steven tells Marc she is there to guide them on their journey to the afterlife. She reminds them that this is not the afterlife, just an afterlife. She tells them of multiple intersectional untethered conscious planes, including the ancestral plane. She goes on to tell them because the Duat's true nature is impossible to comprehend by the human mind, they might perceive the realm as something more recognizable. Marc tells Steven that they imagine the afterlife as a psych ward because they are insane. He figures that the afterlife is the reality and the hospital is the imagination. He tries to walk through a pair of doors but finds himself truly on the ship to Harrow. Realizing that he is not crazy and that the Egyptian afterlife is real, he looks to Steven for further guidance. Steven asks Taweret, and she reaches inside both of their chests. She removes the heart from both Steven and Marc to weigh them on the scales of justice. If their hearts are balanced, they may spend their afterlife in the field of reeds. If not, they'll be cast into the frozen sands for eternity. While Marc tries to discuss the situation with Steven, Taweret calls their attention to the scale. The scales wobble as they did on Harrow's tattoo in episode 1. She tells them that the hearts are not full, meaning they each feel incomplete. She tells them that an unbalanced soul will eventually be claimed by the Duat sands. Steven asks what she suggests they do, and she suggests they go through the memories housed on the boat in order to reconcile any past feelings still unresolved. She suggests that they show each other the truth. Back inside the asylum, Marc and Steven walk through the hall and explore their past memories. They follow the memory of the boy calling for help. They enter a room filled with dead bodies, sitting at tables in a cafeteria. Steven approaches the wobbling scale as Marc identifies each of the bodies. They are the ones Khonshu demanded he kill for justice. They see a young boy watching. Steven demands why he is in a room of people he killed, and Marc tries to keep him from approaching the boy. Steven goes forth anyway and runs after him. Steven follows the boy into a room and locks the door behind him. Marc bangs on the door as Steven watches a barbecue while Marc is with his mother and younger brother. He asks his younger brother if he wants to go to the cave, and the two go off into the forest near their home. It begins to rain as they get closer, but Marc encourages his brother to keep going. As he follows, Steven steps on the skeleton of a bird. The boys go into the cave as the rain gets worse and begins to fill the cave up with water. Steven deliberately tries to find the boys and hears them screaming for their mother as the waters continue to rise. Outside the room, Marc reminds himself that it's just a memory, and he notices another door opening. Marc walks in on his family sitting Shiva for the death of his younger brother. Steven is there watching as well. Their mother tells their father that she wants her son back. As child Marc tries to approach, she screams at him that he shouldn't be there. Steven watches with tears in his eyes as she says that it was his fault his brother drowned. Marc tries to talk to Steven as they transition to the next memory. It is child Marc's birthday, and she doesn't come down even to blow out her candles. The next memory is another birthday, where the mother drinks heavily and continues to guilt-trip child Marc, and he storms off to his room. Steven follows, but is stopped by Marc. They transition to a street in broad daylight, where Steven asks why Marc only remembers when his mother was mean to him, and demands to know what he is hiding. The memory continues to show the father pleading with Marc, who has decided to move out. Marc blames his father for not fixing the situation with his mother. As Steven tries to witness the rest of the memory, he is knocked by Marc once again into another one. They are back in the desert after a vehicle exploded. Steven recognizes the dead bodies as hostages who were killed by Marc. Marc disagrees with the assessment and explains how he was discharged from the military for going AWOL in a fugue state. He then talks about how he went on to work for his former CO, Bushman. The job was to raid an Egyptian tomb, but Bushman changed the plan, calling for no witnesses. Immediately disagreeing with the decision, Marc says he did everything he could to get away from Bushmen. He says they clearly didn't get away since they're all dead. When Steven asks what happened to Marc, he refers to a tomb that has appeared in front of them. The memory shows a mortally wounded Marc crawling to the footsteps of Khonshu to commit suicide. He then hears a voice telling him that it would be a waste. Marc decides to ask who the voice is, and it identifies itself as the god Khonshu. Khonshu tells Marc that he is looking for a warrior to serve as his avatar. Feeling his death upon him, Marc expresses his confusion as to what choice to make. Khonshu sees into Marc's mind and judges him as a worthy candidate. He offers Marc in exchange for his life. Marc must swear to protect the travelers of the night and bring his vengeance to those who would do them harm. Steven sees how Khonshu took advantage of Marc, but Marc saw it as an out for dying after living only the life of a killer. Khonshu presses Marc again for his promise, and Marc obliges. Khonshu manifests an astral form to bring Marc back to life as his Fist of Vengeance, the Moon Knight. Steven draws their attention to the scales, which begin to balance further, but they feel a rock on their ship. They come back to the deck and find Taweret discovering multiple unbalanced souls being condemned before their times, an indication that fear is spreading in the upper world. Steven asks her if they can bring him back in order to get to Khonshu. Though she sees the risks, she tells them to finish balancing their scales before she sends them back. Inside the asylum, Marc promises to tell Steven the truth, but begins to go through a self-inflicting harm episode until he wakes up in a room with Dr. Harrow. Dr. Harrow asks him about why he created Steven. The memory transitions to Steven's memory, where he sees that Marc made Steven up. It is Steven's first memory, but it is interrupted by Marc's mother, who breaks in to beat him with a belt. Marc takes Steven out and explains that he created Steven in order to deal with the abuse he was suffering at the hands of his mother. Whenever she wasn't present, the Steven personality allowed Marc to feel the love of a mother. Marc tells Steven that he got to live a life where he could believe his mother loved him and that she was still alive, a shocking revelation to Steven. Marc then says that when his dad called many years later about her Shiva, he couldn't do it. Steven refuses to accept the story and wakes up in the room with Dr. Harrow, who recognizes him as Marc's other personality. Steven also recognizes Harrow and begins to worry that the asylum is a trick by Taweret. Harrow asks Steven about what Marc may have told him. Steven again refuses to accept his mother's death, and a glass partition shows up between the two. Dr. Harrow apologizes for the misunderstanding and offers to call her since they have her number on file. When he hands the phone to Steven, the partition is no longer there. Steven vocally acknowledges that his mum is dead. In the next scene, Marc's family is sitting Shiva for his mother, and an adult Marc stands outside the building drinking while his father motions for him to join them from inside. Though Marc is dressed appropriately in all black with a yarmulke on his head, he walks away speaking to himself. He breaks down crying and smashes his yarmulke in the ground before clutching it to his chest, saying, "I'm so sorry." As Marc tries to feel his pain, the Steven personality takes over, as he had conditioned it to do whenever the pain associated with his mother would arise. Steven comes to with no recollection of how he arrived there, and talks on his phone to his mother, even though it is obvious he is not on a call. As Steven wanders aimlessly, speaking to no one on a cell phone, Marc describes the situation. Marc's mother died 2 months before the events of the show. Marc tells Steven how he couldn't face the shame of how his mother made him feel. Steven tells Marc that his brother's death wasn't his fault since he was only a child when it happened. The ground shakes, suggesting to Steven that they reached the gates of Osiris to the upper world. She regrets to inform them that the scales remained unbalanced, meaning their souls may be claimed by Duat. Several undead souls board the ship, and Marc recognizes them again as souls taken by him as the Moon Knight. While Marc fights them, Steven helps and ultimately finds the strength to help Marc fight, but gets dragged off the ship. Marc pleads for Steven to get back and calls for the ship to stop. The Steven personality tries to run after the ship, but ends up frozen in the sands. Marc cries for Steven again, but is told by Taweret that his scale has balanced, meaning that he has arrived at the end of his journey. Marc looks around and finds himself in the field of reeds.